We'd like to call the meeting to order. Document the time is 6:32, and if you would stand for the pledge with me, flag in the back. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. And Tori, if you would get our collective thoughts pointed in the right direction, that would be a good start for the evening.
All right. So we're just gonna arrive. That's what we do. We come here, we sit, and we breathe into where we've come from and what we're holding from where we come from, and we just breathe into it. So take a deep breath in, and breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. So the in-breath, you're breathing in awareness of what you're holding inside, and on the out-breath, you're relaxing into it. Breathe in awareness, and breathe out letting go. As we breathe into our experience of where we come from and where we are now, June is a great reminder for us as governance board that we are graduating a group of seniors with the promise that they are college career ready, ready to lead healthy, successful, productive lives and be engaged in their global and local communities. It's a reminder of us of the purpose of our organization, for who, at what cost, and what we do here together. Let's take a deep breath in, out, in a spirit of celebratory. We come together to govern for the better of our community. So on your next out breath, let's gather.
All right.
All right.
So next, agenda review and adjustments. I do have one, and in the interest of the understanding of having at least one senior in a room and at least one other who may need some time.
Two others.
Two others, yes, sorry. Wow, that was not good. I would like to recommend that we move the student report to the board up to the top, so we can get the update and get them to move on for the evening. Any other agenda adjustments or review items? Nothing? Okay. So we'll move, where are we? Student report. So we'll move 7A up to the top and right after the consent. Next would be public comments. Any public comments? Then the consent agenda. I would accept a motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Any discussion topics there? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor accepting consent agenda as is, aye? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Who will we turn this over to first? Destiny, Sophia, who wants to start?
Yeah, sorry. So the follow-up from 2 months ago, I talked about how seniors were struggling a little bit, but I talked with Mr. Wheeler and we kind of solved the problem because we decided to end the senior project at August 20th if you want to go to early college. So we won't have an issue of people struggling to graduate. For the math, I think the reason why I thought seniors were struggling was because the teachers, but it was the students' fault for not like paying attention or following what the teachers recommended. Next, I also talked to Wheeler about other projects that we wanted to do because we wanted to be more involved in the school and tell you more about what we can do to help the school be a better place. So I heard that Mr. Wheeler was trying to set up an AP class at, a transfer sort of, but not a transfer. We're gonna team up with Colchester schools so we can do AP class. We can bring our students over there to do AP classes while they come over for business classes because they don't have any business classes and we can provide them the business classes. So we're working on that, but I heard that they couldn't do it because nobody wanted to come from their school to do any business classes, and neither did our students want to go there for AP classes. So next year, we're gonna figure out some other schools that we can go to so we can let our students have AP classes. Yeah, was that really confusing?
No, it's good exploration. It shows that you're exploring the options. Yeah.
Some other projects will be like working with Mr. Dorfman on the Roland project and some others.
I guess I'll insert my perspective as an early college student. So early college students ended classes on the first week of May, so I've been able to sleep in since then. And now I've also been able to stop in and work on my senior project. So a lot of the early college students had a kind of a tight schedule to come in and finish their paper and then do their presentation. But as of what I know right now, any student who presented has passed so far for their senior projects and they're all set to graduate. So that's good news. Yeah. And
I want to add something.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay.
yeah.
My name is Hiva Larusi, and I'm taking her place.
Kicking me out.
Welcome.
Thank you. I also talked to Mr. Wheeler about a project that I'm planning to have for next year. So basically what I noticed with our student population is a lot of kids come in and they think that, oh, it's okay, they can just do everything their senior year. And then we end up having a lot of students not graduate or drop out as a result. And we also have a lot of newcomers who don't speak English, so they have a harder time graduating. So my plan is to have some sort of program that will help them like go through high school, like plan better, know like all the helps and opportunities that are out there, because we have a lot of opportunities, but not enough students know about them and take advantage of them. What I've been noticing is that the same people take advantage of all the opportunities, and then a lot of the students who are like new or just don't care yet don't know about them. So
Always good to bring others along with something that you've learned. But I did have one question for you, Sophia, on the math question. The issue of, who is at fault is interesting, but, at the end of the day, what the real concern is that the other students coming up behind understand that if they get behind, it's going to be hard. Is there any effort to reach back to the other students to bring their awareness up that I need to pay attention now or I'm going to end up in trouble later? Is there any kind of a communication loop that can go back to them to help them not get to that point?
I think the teachers try really hard, but the students aren't listening. They send letters home. They always remind them that they need to catch up, but
I was thinking more of a student forum to do that, because a lot of times that is a way that is better done peer-to-peer rather than a student dictating, right? Here's my lesson to you, not you know, it comes across a lot differently. Something to think about, don't need an answer now, but if it helps to go back, it may be during team meetings or whatever, going down to the younger grades and educating them in your woes, right?
Yeah,
So just a thought.
And I would also recommend, because teachers and parents are kind of like, we hear the same voice over, no doubt we start ignoring them as we're children and all that. And so I totally recommend that, know that you have a lot of resources here on the board who will be more than happy to tell students the importance of mathematics and why you need to get started earlier, or any of the other, and I say that about the other project that you're doing. If there's anything that we can do, as, you know, treat us not as just as a board that you report to. We're in this together as a community, and note that there's a lot of wisdom and experience and resources from the people here and who we can connect with, that we can bring people in to help you talk. And so, so I guess if there's one lesson and one takeaway, is that don't be afraid to ask us for help.
Please.
And use the right communications through Principal Wheeler, then to you know, get up to Sean and on all that. So.
All right. Anything else on your end?
If you want to know, JUCO is going really great this year because of our new schedule.
Started today.
Yeah, it started today. We get to leave school early and we get to come late if we have to. Other things is that entrepreneurship, there was several winners, and it made our school proud and made Ms. Pocket really proud. And lastly, we had a school recognition where students got awards for their hard work.
Nice. Awesome.
Heba, did you get some sort of a business award? Did I hear? Can you tell us what that's?
Entrepreneurship plan. So basically, in our entrepreneurship class, we all wrote business plans, and at the end of the class, if your plan is done, Ms. Pocket sends it to this competition. I'm not sure the name, but they basically choose the best business plans in the whole state, and then the best pitch for the plan. So you have to make a video and a business plan. We had 3 student winners, I think. Xavier and I won the business plan and got honorable mentions for the pitch, and Rama got honorable mention for the pitch as well. I'm not sure if Xavier won the pitch or got honorable mention. I wasn't sure. The speaker, people were cheering. I couldn't hear.
I know.
That's exciting. That's becoming a regular occurrence and an expectation out of the class. Done very well. All right. Anything else? All right. So, as is our tradition, we have a little bit of some swag to go along, but Destiny in our
It's adorable.
sincere thanks for your
Thank
time, your effort, and your wisdom and influence. We
I wish I could
would
be
like
here
to
more, but
give you a few. Well, you know what though, you guys have given us a lot, and it gives us a lot more to think about with new people keep coming on and trying to help us understand how we do better, not from with my hat on, but with your hat on. So you present us with your hat to help us understand how things go. So thank you, and very good luck to you as you move forward.
Thank you for having me here. I really enjoyed coming on Wednesdays out here. Thank you. She's gonna
You came
cry.
up with a replacement, so that's awesome. And you will be a junior next year?
Yeah.
Okay. Sophia, you'll be a senior, right? Maintain our 1-year separation. So I look forward to having you on for a couple of years. And as we go, as we've told you, Sophia, as well, and be not bashful while you're in here. If we got something that we need to talk about, that's what we're here for. So we hope to get good, deep student voice, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what that is, so we look forward to you helping us with that. So thank you very much. And Destiny, good luck with everything.
Stay in touch.
I will. I won't disappear. I've been here every single day for the past month.
I would be as much interested in 2 years and coming back and just letting us know in retrospect, any of the things that helped you and what we can do differently. That's where it really matters. Awesome. So with that, you are more than welcome to stay, but I also understand that there's potentially a lot of work to do, so you're also dismissed if you would like to be. This doesn't always go this fast. You'll have to pay the price at a whole meeting sometime later.
And Destiny, you're welcome to take your name placard and put it on
Yes.
your dorm room door at
Yes,
Skidmore
please.
if you'd like.
Yes, please, please.
So everybody on your floor knows
No.
that you are a student rep to the board.
Yes. We don't have it in the budget for the placard, for the holders though, so we're gonna have to leave that. I wanna just be clear. So it's up to you guys how you wanna proceed. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You're very welcome.
Have a great summer.
Thank you. You guys have a great summer too.
We'll see you soon.
All right, so we'll move then into, we'll do the treatment of staff, and then we'll get into the asset protection with the Main Street Development Project. So first, into the policy interpretation of 2.2. We have the write-up in here. Again, this is was done last year, so any comments? Sean, any major changes in here that you've?
No, the only change that I did notice after it was published in the packet was on page 1, the second to last paragraph, that due to your support for a human resources coordinator, all new staff now meet with her instead of meeting with my assistant. So I will make that change in the evidence section of the first part there.
Okay,
Other than that, it's there wasn't any substantive changes.
all right. So any comments, thoughts? The one comment that I have, or the one thought that I would like to throw out on this one, is the very bottom of page 1. Under the clarity of rules for the staff and provide effective handling of grievances. I think we just witnessed the grievance process move through, all the way through. Something happened to get to the board level. Everything seemed to have followed the process. I think that fits in the write-up here under the reporting compliance. I guess my question then becomes, when we look back on this in September, under the superintendent evaluation section, do we necessarily want a section in here written that references that particular incident and the outcome that it had? In other words, it ends up being neutral. But do we note that in here as being evidence?
I'm fine with it if it's mentioned, as long as it isn't used as a penalty, but as a lesson learned type of situation. And then it's in a lesson learned, not necessarily, holistically. Meaning, like, what could have gone, like, what, was it a system issue? Was it a personnel issue? Or, because our findings, in one sense, and I don't know where that fits in the grand scheme of things, because to have something like that is always a time to reflect and learn.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I'm big on that.
Yep. Yeah, it's not punitive. The question isn't for punitive measures.
I emphasize the punitive part because sometimes that's how it can be written and can be forgotten that it was used as a punitive. But if it's not written in a format of a lesson learned, of what we could do, like what did we learn from the situation to move forward,
I think this one was as much, this was a positive that everything went through the system, it went through the process, it went through the grievance process, it ended up being in favor of, right? I guess my question though becomes, had the outcome been different? Had the outcome been a finding for the grievant? Would we want that in the monitoring report as continued evidence at that point of a need to, because then it would be potentially non-compliant, potentially. And at that point, at the end of the year, you have the documentation when you do the evaluation that it's actually in writing and what came out, and potentially later having that as a what actions need to be taken to prevent these.
I mean, it is for the board at that point, you know.
Right. So is it any different if it's a positive outcome versus an outcome the other way? The question makes sense? See what I'm trying to look at.
Let me see if I can I
Yep,
try to
please,
summarize
please.
for my understanding
Yep.
too. In section 1, it talks about that the superintendent shall not operate without written personnel rules for the following reasons, right?
Yep.
So what I hear you saying is if there was an outcome due to not operating to base for the superintendent to violate one of those rules, then that should be in the evidence and would mean out of compliance. I also heard you saying that if a grievant was to be, if their position was to be supported at whatever level, does that mean that the policy was not, or the policy was not followed by the superintendent? Which I don't think it would assume, because you could have an outcome for the grievant, right? That would be in support of their position, and the rules still could have been followed.
Okay. Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
It does.
Yep.
And then I think the third thing that I heard you talking about was evidence. So should there be, maybe in the evidence section, some more specific data about the number of, whether it could be informal grievances that were resolved, it could be formal grievances that went to level 2, level 3, or beyond, and whether or not that should be included in the evidence section.
But anything below your level is not something that we would take up under this particular policy, right? If everything were followed all the way up through.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking along the lines of I guess, a policy violation and the documentation that gets us later to have that evidence as we do the evaluation, because that's where it's gonna really end up being in place. So, again, not necessarily maybe this particular situation, but on an ongoing basis, is that something that we would document right in here?
I mean, I don't know that it's necessary to do that from my perspective.
Okay. And we remember, just don't want to end up, I have a very keen focus on the evaluation period and being very concrete with when we get to that piece that we have the evidence that we need. And these essentially are our evidence.
No, and there's way too many double negatives on this one. I'm so lost on what I'm supposed to. But, like, you know, when people go through grievances, right, there are two ways of looking at it. It's one that superintendent did something wrong. That's not what we're talking about here. But it's also, if you keep on filing a grievance, someone in the other side, if we favor the group, is that they interpreted the policy wrong in one sense. And that's why they keep on bringing, or the policy itself that they're holding a grievance on or trying to cite on is misinterpreted or not well written. I think in some ways that's what we found, right? And in some ways it is for us as a board to keep track of these grievances on our own and to kind of file that as evidence on the proper policy governance, right? If there's a policy governance that says that we have rules that are not well written, a fact of evidence is the grievance process of someone taking it all the way, and we use the findings of what we find as evidence that, right? If evidence would suggest that, and we're not suggesting that you were at fault on this, but if there was evidence of the superintendent here, that's where we as a board have to remember that it gets written here. If that makes sense.
Yes, and that was kind of my.
And I think that's
where
your
you
point,
document
but
that,
we have
if
to
there
be
is an
careful
issue.
where that grievance is being remembered so that it's put in the proper place.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And a lot of this is about having the procedures in place and the process clearly described somewhere, right?
Right.
So another way for the board to get at that is through direct inspection, right? To come and say, you know, we'd like to set up a time to come in and look at all of the data that you have around how the steps of a grievance, you know, how many have been filed over a period of time, you know, so that you could check and see if it's in compliance. Or the other way is to have somebody do that for you and report to you.
Okay. Good. I wanted to have the discussion because I wanted to be prepared later if anything else does come up and we know we've got at least a balancing point.
It's a good question, and it's one of those like data thing, like how do we keep that knowledge over as a board changes over a year?
Right.
Remember, where does this like finding go when we're reading these policies?
Yep. We fortunately don't have an issue, and which is a good thing. I just want to make sure we are able to capture them if we do and act on it. Okay. I would accept a motion to accept the policy 2.2, the treatment of staff.
With
monitoring report.
With the caveat to change the executive
With the change
says.
in the one piece to HR.
I move the motion.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, off to next section here is under asset protection is the 401 Main Street development project. So here, a lot of information in the packet. So we've got some help understanding what is in front of us and what we have to think about.
Yeah, so I'd like to invite Eric Horwald, who is the City of Winooski Planning and Zoning Manager, and was very involved in all the documentation that you received. And so his purpose tonight is to bring some clarity to all of that, to let you know kind of what the process has been for 401 Main Street right out in front of the school where the gas station used to be and where the laundromat is still on the back of that property, and then where the apartments and the daycare are located. And just as preface, I attended what's called a project review committee meeting at the end of January, I believe it was, to hear the proposal and see some of the documents, and got a chance to see all the city departments in action, which was really interesting because they all got to kind of push on the project from their respective areas like public safety and public works, planning and zoning, the city manager's role of seeing how all the pieces fit together and so forth. So it's a very rigorous process that the city put folks through when they're going through redevelopment. And so Eric's going to more kind of just show you what's happening out there, what the proposal is on the table, and answer some questions that you might have.
Yep, absolutely. And also, John Rauscher, our Public Works Director, is here as well to talk about some of the specifics also. So I guess, should I just take a seat?
Anything specific you can,
probably
documents I can drive for you here?
Probably the civil set, that set, yeah, that one there is probably going to be the best one to look at. The third page, I think, is going to show the best set of information on that, I think. So, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here tonight to speak with you all about this project. It's not often that we get to come out into the community and follow up on some of these activities before other groups like this. And this particular development is one that will have could have some impact on the school district. So I think it's important that you are all aware of what the specifics are, how the project functions within the context of the city's regulations, but also what that means to the school district going forward as well. So this is a project that is in our form-based code zoning at 401 Main Street. And basically, our form-based code is something that's been set up to really look more at the siting and the design and the layout of the site of a development rather than what the uses are specifically in the project. So this is in our urban general district specifically. So what they've proposed for the project is a 3-story building. It's set right up on Main Street with all the parking in the back. So it's a 3-story building with two spaces for commercial on the first floor, and then 2 stories of apartments above for 8 total units. So a 3-story building that would fill out that corner lot. It's about a third of an acre total in size, so it's not a very large lot, but they're meeting their parking needs between the property where the gas station was and the property where the laundromat is, kind of combining the two. As Sean mentioned, so we received the application towards the end of December for this project specifically. And generally how these projects work is there's a lot of upfront discussion with the city and the city staff and the applicants to figure out what the code's going to look like to make sure all of the parts and pieces that they need are in place before we even accept an application. So they submitted their application at the end of December. As Sean mentioned, our project review committee met towards the end of January to discuss the project. At that point, it was consistent with our zoning regulations, but one of the purposes of that project review committee is to get input from all the other departments to make sure that there's not something else that we're missing, or that there's not another issue that could come up outside of the scope of zoning. In a lot of cases, our land use regulations, and zoning in particular, they don't take into account a lot of the specific information related to public safety or traffic impacts or things like that. So that's one of the advantages to that project review committee. At that meeting, one of the items that was raised was concerns with traffic. With redevelopment of the site, they're proposing a drive-through on the building, which is permitted. But there was some concerns about traffic and the potential conflicts with both the AM and the PM peak traffic times. So the site itself, here's the first floor of the building.
You want that? Is that going to be helpful too?
Actually, let's see. Are you in the architectural or in the civil plans there? I think you're in the architectural plans. So if you can switch to the civil plans, that slide right there would be great if you can bring that one up, or just blow that up larger. So the traffic pattern that's proposed right now for the site includes an entrance off of Norman Street onto the site, an exit. Yeah, that's great. So they're proposing the main entrance now to be down here on Norman Street. Currently on the site there's 2 entrances onto the property. I believe they have a curb cut here and then this curb cut here as well. So
where you were just doing that first curb cut, is that where school people exit?
No, Norman Street's right down here. The exit for the school is actually going to be up in this area above the slide. It's not.
Yeah, it's not on there.
Gas station.
Okay.
Closest to Norman Street.
The gas station property right now has 2 curb cuts off of Main Street.
Okay.
So what they were proposing is to eliminate one of the curb cuts, kind of realign the curb cut that's on Norman now that serves both the laundromat, or that serves the laundromat,
Right.
so that it would serve both properties.
Okay.
So they would have a reconfigured curb cut down here. They would keep the northerly-most curb cut and make that an exit only onto Main Street. And then they have an exit also through the laundromat property onto the school property.
Okay.
So
where it says 32 Norman, that's the laundry.
that's the laundromat building. Yes, that's correct. This is the laundromat building. This is now basically a vacant lot.
Okay.
So what we had asked them to do is to complete a traffic study to show what the impacts might be on this lot. I believe that was included with your agenda packet. So based on the information that came out of the traffic study, one of the recommendations that we went back to them with was to eliminate one of the lanes on this northerly exit. So right now, they're showing an exit for the drive-through lane, and then a separate lane to exit onto Main Street. So we asked them to remove one of those and limit it to just one exit onto Main Street. And then more importantly for you all is to get a formal agreement for access, for this particular access, across the 32 Norman Street property to the school property. So I believe that's where things kind of stand right now. We went back to them with those two pieces and said, we need you to complete these two items and provide us with documentation that shows that you have an agreement in place and that you've redesigned that exit before we will permit you to build this project. So right now, we're kind of still in that phase, waiting to hear back from them on those requests to see what they will need to do. Potentially, if they're not able to complete either of those items, they may need to do some redesign of the site. So it wouldn't necessarily mean that the use will go away. It may mean that they just need to do some reconfiguration, come back with some different traffic patterns, things like that. But there were some concerns out of the traffic impact study that having the uses that are proposed in this building, particularly the drive-through, was going to be potentially a significant conflict with not only traffic trying to enter this site using Norman Street, but also morning school traffic, drop-offs, things like that, and how all that is going to exit the property. So there was some concerns with that, and I don't know, John, if you wanted to come up and add any additional information on the traffic impact study, or at this point, we can just open it up to questions. Like I said, John's here to provide a lot of he has the knowledge and the detail on the traffic and the specifics of that, but I think that, was there anything else, Sean, that you wanted me to?
No, I mean, I would just add that, I have serious safety concerns, along with the congestion around traffic, but both from entering on Norman Street, where we have crosswalks and we have students on both sides of the street, and many of our students entering in the morning on that Norman side. And then a very serious concern about traffic coming from this lot into our lot through that opening next to the laundromat now, particularly, again, at high traffic times. We do have students, as much as we may talk about it, that cross over through the parking lot from the Norman entrance. So I would think that would be a very serious safety concern for us and our staff, students, and families.
And it's one of the interesting components of this project is that Norman Street, I believe, is public up to about not quite the back of the property line on 32, and then it becomes kind of the driveway for the school. So it kind of has a dual role in that regard.
Up to, or what would be beyond the cut for the entrance there? It's city.
I believe so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's almost to the back of the 32 Norman property.
But it encompasses on the city side of that, the cut that they.
That's correct. That's correct.
And you realize that left turn lane onto Norman Street coming down from the other way is only fitting of 2-3 cars.
Exactly.
And if you talk about a morning traffic, that's going to block up.
And that was one of our concerns, why we wanted them to do the traffic impact study to evaluate what that would look like.
I don't think you could have picked a more congested area with small human beings to propose this building. I mean, it's astounding considering, because that is such a congested area that people get irritated already. And for them to be wanting to cut their irritation off in the morning, it's around children.
But they get donuts and coffee.
So it's astounding.
Yeah, and that's one of the I guess one of the challenges with some of the regulatory process is the development itself is permitted. It's the issues related to traffic and some of the congestions that we wanted to have them take an additional look at.
But the conditions of the traffic would hopefully impact whether it can be built? I mean, if it can't be...
It will impact how they it would impact how they design the site.
And so then once when they're coming back to you for redesign, do you then do another traffic impact study around the new redesign? Or did you give them options of how to to mitigate.
So we gave them the option of eliminating one of the lanes going onto Main Street. No, you're okay. One of the lanes going onto Main Street and the agreement with you all for the exit onto the school property. So if they can't, and I believe the way they've developed their circulation pattern is that they need both of those options. So if those
they
go
would
away.
need the exit to exit onto our property to allow customers or whatever out of the
Potentially.
property.
Right, because if they eliminate that one lane, if they go down to just one lane exiting onto Main Street,
Right.
they wouldn't have any way to, there would be nowhere for the traffic to go currently,
Right.
other than to the
And
school
it-
property.
No, so then we have the ability to say whether they can exit onto our.
Absolutely. I mean, it's your property, so we want to make sure there's an agreement.
Morning traffic is predominantly north to south, heading into Burlington. Not too worried about the afternoon traffic. Coffee on the afternoon trip home may not necessarily be that big a deal. The morning traffic being predominantly north to south, you got the short runway coming in the turn lane. Arguably, that'll back itself up past the light. That in and of itself may not necessarily be that big a deal. Cutting off one of the two lanes out, and I think I read in here that one of the recommendations is that exit that is now only one lane going out is a right turn only, heading
that was
in the
also-
opposite direction of the morning traffic.
Yep.
Most of the traffic then coming north to south that would be stopping in there would end up going through our parking lot, through the light, and circulating back onto North Street. And that would increase that traffic. That would be a very high traffic exit.
Yeah,
Because
potentially.
that is the way traffic is flowing, and I'm not willing to put those kids at risk. We've not only got the kids in the school, we've got the kids in the YMCA building as well, because they're all
Right, there's
coming in at the
preschool.
same time.
Yeah.
And they're going right across the front of that traffic flow. That doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have
Or I'm not
options.
willing to open that up for that kind of traffic.
Sure.
For that. I don't know what else others feel, but.
I feel like the inconvenience will make that Dunkin' Donuts go away, and like, just that traffic, like that left turn lane. I mean, you have no lights to make left turn lights, and the fact that there's no lane markings by winter time, so you don't know whether you should be in the left, right, lefts to go straight is gonna confuse folks. I the building itself and all that, the purpose, I kind of want to make work, but we really got to think long and hard about like this traffic flow. Like even when I looked at the parking lot, so you can't make a right turn, it has no flow
Right.
of like from a civil, and it's just driving me nuts.
Yeah,
And-
one of the things we talked about internally was if we were to cut off this, or if the developers were to eliminate this exit, they could potentially bring traffic in and loop it back out to the Norman Street instead of basically reverse the direction of this lane. That would still allow them to do one lane out onto Main Street for the drive-through as a right out only. So the only traffic you'd have going to Main Street would be the drive-through lane, but then that would just push more of the congestion down to Norman Street. So,
There's a lot of kids walking around.
and then potentially, correct, and then potentially loop back through the parking lot
Because you
anyway.
can't go, because you can't go,
Right, exactly. Right, you'd have to,
right, and that's only gonna make a circle in the parking lot at that point.
right.
What's to the right, the top of the roads? Like, what's in between? Is it just land? Is it our land that goes between this property and the left turn lane that goes with the light to exit out the school?
So there's the daycare
Okay, the daycare's
property is
there.
right here, and then after that is the left lane, and then there's a strip of land. And
That's a
then
horrible
then the right
intersection.
another
design
lane.
Where they don't line up, for sure.
either. No lineup. Drives me nuts.
So,
So-
one thing, just a little guidance for the board tonight would be that there's no action to be taken
Right.
tonight. This is really getting everybody up to speed with the process and what's happening and where we are. There has been an inquiry from a consultant for the owner of the property out there about talking to us and to you about granting them access through that. So that would be something that we would need to respond to at some point. But For tonight, there isn't really, it's just getting you guys smarter about what the design proposal is, what the potential implications and challenges might be from the school perspective.
Yep. Can you bring that back, that last one you had back? I just want to make sure I'm clear on that last point of closing the top exit and rerouting the traffic would still have the exit be through the parking lot, only at that point it's going through more of the parking lot because it's starting at the beginning rather than down past the laundromat.
Yep.
Still crossing across the front end of the YMCA and in the path of more children. Just by definition.
At the time, like the time of day and,
Yeah, I can't. So the report was this past month. So what they did is they used some regional data that was in the last couple of years, and then they actually went out and did their own traffic studies. So they looked at the AM peak, which is like 7:15 a.m. to 8:15 a.m., and then the PM peak, which is like 4:30 p.m. to 5:30 p.m.
So they missed the release of school.
Yeah, I mean, so I think what they were looking at, the 4:30, that's the high commuter time. And really, our major concern, which you guys already hit on, was sort of, this is on the wrong side of the street for this type of use, and how, you know, those folks that are potentially going through the drive-through, like, they're gonna have to make that maneuver back out to make the left-hand turn southbound, like,
Back into the congested traffic.
Yeah,
It's already backed up in a lane that doesn't hold enough traffic already.
it doesn't flow well at all. So that was our original, like, concern that triggered all this.
yeah, and it's just weird to like, you know, do a traffic without like, and maybe they did simulations, but you can't just depend on like the current track flow because there's no store there, right? There's no reason for me to turn left except to turn left for the school. And most of our folks going to the school aren't living on that side because we're bordering Colchester. All of our students are pretty much on the southern end of Winooski, right? So like there's questions that I have real doubts about how valid the traffic flow is, even at 7:15 to 8:15.
Yeah, we did ask them to, as part of that study, assume the proposed use of the Dunkin' Donuts being there and what that would do for traffic generation and traffic impacts. I didn't read the study close enough to know if they did build that in.
Yeah. So what they did was they did sort of what the existing conditions are, which you probably saw, like what the no build option is, but they also built in sort of what the garage or the service station usage was, and kind of compared the existing with the service station against the build option with the Dunkin' Donuts. So what they show is, you know, they rate it on a level of service is how they traffic engineers use, like A to F. A is really good, not a lot of delays. F is really poor. So they did AM and a PM peak level of service study, and not surprisingly, it's not very good in the morning and not very good in the evening. But the build option that they modeled doesn't really impact that, but it's sort of the micro movements that we're more concerned about, like that, especially in the AM peak, like what that does to the exit at the school and the signal and how that's impacted, not the more little intersection delays. That's kind of our concern.
Children walking in the parking lot is far more important than somebody waiting 4 minutes for the light, which you don't take into account in the traffic study by lights and waits, especially when they're ticked off because they're waiting 3 lights.
And it's time to get to work. I like the tag at the end of these documents, design with community in mind. So that's true.
All right, anything else we need to know if we're gonna have any look at this later with a request? Anything that doesn't necessarily stand out in your minds?
I mean, I think that was the traffic issues were the biggest ones that we wanted to follow up with from the city's perspective, and I think now we want to make sure that we're being good neighbors as well and not permitting a development that's just going to cause more issues and harm to the schools. So I think that's, we're here to be a resource if you need any more information about the project going forward as you.
What sucks right now is that school, like, we only have, 5-6 days of school left for the morning. And I would really encourage the developers, or not just to look at the flow, but to come and watch the school side of the parking lot and see how the children, the walking patterns and all that. And anybody who knows who's come in the morning, you see them like they're not really walking along the sidewalks or the sidewalk. And you know, if they can come out and just watch this so that they can really see what our concerns are, or if one of the city folks want to just come by and videotape, you know, with their phone and just to show them that that's what our concerns are and why. Because I don't want to like just say like, hey, you know, they're going to come back and do another traffic study in like the middle of June and July, and they're not going to see those little people walking at that point. And other safety concerns that you can think of, Sean, that we should be aware of.
No, I think those are the biggest ones that we've talked about.
At this point, we don't have anyone running through our parking lot that doesn't come in here for something purposeful around being in this school building. I mean, there might be the errant
Just the
person.
why.
Right,
Right, not
right,
the
but
why
they're
business,
with
the normal.
kids. I mean, but they're purposely here managing kids, right? So we don't just have people driving through this parking lot, and this parking lot prior has always been a challenge, even with just for folks who come to the school to park, has always been a tough place. And this adds a whole nother element onto it of concern.
Apologize. Part of this is also just the fact that, you know, I'm sure that we're being influenced because it's Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm thinking morning coffee. Like, if it was a restaurant where the prime clientele is at noon and dinner, I'd probably be a little bit less. I'd still work on the traffic flow so it doesn't get through the parking lot area, but that would be less of a concern, right? But this is a breakfast, like their main sense of
Is moving in
operation.
and out fast.
Moving in and out fast, and it's
Yeah.
breakfast.
And it's before, yeah.
Right.
And there's a Dunkin' Donuts right up the road.
And I know that we don't have a say to who they get. I mean, sure.
No, exactly. But it's not by, it's actually the realities of of the purpose, the use of that purpose, and how it would impact our student body
It
and
just
parents.
seems like a bad business for Dunkin', but a restaurant, a Subway, put Subway there. Be fine.
I think one final thing that I would add is, you know, whenever we're looking at something like this, we've already addressed a lot of what we see as kind of the threats and the challenges and what opportunities might there be. And the only opportunity that I have thought of so far is that we are headed into a significant construction project, and would there be some opportunities to impact traffic flow overall from a school perspective in a positive way, and maybe alleviate some of our parking challenges, and work with the developer to maybe accommodate something that might be a little more community and school friendly in terms of what is in there. So just, I think, you know, we should always be thinking also about maybe what are some possible opportunities that we could leverage as well for our school community when this comes up.
School or broader community,
Yeah.
Is there time to be able to explore the opportunities with our project starting up? And I don't know what the timeline for this is. You know, just knowing what the time frame is to be able to look at it creatively. It's a wonderful perspective, and it's certainly necessary, because that is a tricky spot, regardless of what y'all are doing and what we're doing. Like, it's always been a hard place, and a safety play. You know, it's rooted in safety.
Sure.
So if there's some space to be able to think that creatively, it's certainly worth the while. I just would hate to have it move along and it happen and us not be able to get to the opportunities and the possibilities of creating it in a way that is more beneficial for all. Because there are certainly improvements that are necessary in that parking lot as is, without that impact, right? So opportunities come and strengths come when you have time to really think it through. And I don't know, with partnering with the folks who are doing our work and partnering with the folks who are doing that work, if there's even the space and time to make that happen.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
All right, anything else? All right, Eric, thank you.
Absolutely, thank you very much.
Sean,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
very much.
And like I said, if you have any questions or need any additional information, we'll be happy to provide that.
Thank you.
All right, we may reach out if we do have the developer come, just so we have all broad perspective.
Okay, great.
All right. And next, we get to capital timeline.
Woo-hoo.
All right.
You ready for this?
Let's keep moving. We have important things as we go along here.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me grab my agenda.
So the project overview here is one set of 3 or 4 that we have consecutive on the agenda here, so.
Right. So to break that out for you a little bit, I'm going to do an overview, and then you do have a couple of action items there around approving an owner's project manager RFP, and then making a decision with a recommendation from the executive committee around a construction manager versus a general contractor, and then talking a little bit about how some stuff may be coming up over the summer, and we may need to get the board together in July and August to take some actions around those items, OPM and GC or CM. So I wanted to start with, this was not in your packet, it's the handout that I gave you, and in terms of an overview of roles and kind of the people and the groups that will be involved in this process as we move forward with the construction project. And in terms of the full board, you will be getting monthly updates from this summer until hopefully just about 2.5 years from now or so on the progress of the project. You will also have some required board actions like tonight around RFPs related to operation project manager, construction manager, financial and legal required actions by the board that will come to you throughout the process. And then in addition, continuing your communication to the broader community about the project and advocacy, and really keeping the community connected through things like the newsletter and other events, and informally throughout the community. We also will have a formal executive committee, which is a smaller group that came out of that larger group that worked for 2.5 years to get us where we are. So the board members, Mike and Alex, who have been on that, myself and Rebecca, and then Shane Racine, who's our facilities supervisor. And then included in that are the David and Cam from Truex. And then when we do get the owner's project manager and the CM, they will also become a part of that group. And then we will continue to have the broader committee, and we met with them last month to kind of explain their role. They will most likely not meet as frequently as they did leading up to the project, which was monthly, probably more like quarterly. And it will be continued to make up of all of those different stakeholders, teachers, support staff, students, parents, community members, and so forth. And we'll use that group, again, as kind of an arm of communication and advocacy throughout the community, both in the school and outside of the school. And then any questions on the kind of the groupings and who's involved? Okay. So schedule-wise, what we started with, and Truex Collins built this, was kind of 2 options around timeline. And we had talked throughout the project and felt like it was important, especially being in a school, and that summertime is pretty important to when we have, it's not as busy as normally during the school year, to really allow construction to get going. And so after having Dave and Cam develop these options and share them with us, we want to go with the one that is really going to get us into the ground and get moving next summer, opposed to holding it off until the following fall. And I think that I have that one. Yeah. So this one was not in your packet. This was just recently updated by Dave and Cam. So you can see we passed the bond vote. We are through the appeal period as of last Thursday, and we're into project organization that will happen this summer. Rebecca and I have already begun to meet with Dave and Cam. Rebecca has already started doing some of the financial work with Bond Bank. And Truex Collins will have some of their folks coming in during the summer and doing site work and get in the building as we lead up to programming in the fall, which is really having Dave and Cam come back and meet with all the different groups of teachers and staff in the building and take the work that they had done prior to get to concept design and then get into the details of the size of rooms, what's, furniture, where do we need water, what kind of technology and power are we going to need in rooms, movable walls, getting really down to that level of detail so that Dave and Cam can then start to write the really detailed construction documents. So then after they get that information in that programming part in here, they will go back and do what they call schematic design, and that will happen through September and November, and then the design development in the winter. And at that point, we will have already gotten on our owner's project manager and a construction manager if you decide to go that way, and they will be supporting that work all along. And then we get into in next spring, beginning of next spring around March, where we have a guaranteed maximum price contract. All the permits start going, and then phase one with construction documents would begin or would be completed in the spring, and then construction starting after school is out next summer. And again, you would be getting monthly updates on all of this stuff as we go along from that. That would be built by the executive committee. Any questions on the timeline, the schedule? All right, so on your handout there as well, on the financial side of things, Rebecca's already started doing some work. We will have a need in this, an FY20 for a bond anticipation note, and they're telling us that, that about $7 million was what we should get started with for the FY20, which will allow us to do pre-construction documentation and so forth. And so that's where we may need some authorization from you that may come earlier than your next scheduled board meeting, that we may need to get you in here. Also on the financial side, we'll need to open a couple of additional checking accounts, which will require your authorization, one for the band and a second one for fundraising, so that we can put those dollars in. And then lastly, there'll be a plan that will be developed and be brought to you in the early fall about the rest of the financing and how that would play out over the next couple of years as we after this first ban, and there's some different options for that Rebecca's already been discussing with, if you remember, Paul Giuliani, who was here, the lawyer who helped us with the warning documents. He's been supporting Rebecca in that.
The bond anticipation note here, 7 million. I thought that was closer to 12.5 in that first year. Is there a different number there, a different timing we're going to be going with?
So I met with Dave, and we went through a budget process, and we put some numbers in. And I feel confident that the 7 million can get us through between now and next July, and that's really what we want to do, to have the interest stay minimal for us as we start this project. The reason some of that number came off is because we don't need to have the full amount of the contingency as cash ready. So we'll just go with what we think the hard costs are going to be for the first year. We can certainly ask for more. I'm just trying to maintain the interest payment.
No, all I'm saying is, so does that necessarily though mean that the total cost is coming down?
You know,
I think the original answer, the initial answer to that probably is no, right? We're just moving some of the contingency out further down. If you're going to do that, does that just put us into a year later into the construction where we then have to take out a bigger bond and have then a 1 year larger tax increase than we would if we were to smooth it. At the end of the 3 years, I understand we're gonna have the total.
Right.
And it's gonna be the total. I'm just wondering if you were gonna put it in 3 discrete steps, if you lower that first one to about half, something else has to go up significantly. I'm just gonna question whether that makes the most sense. And rather than potentially taking the contingency out of the bigger one.
Well, I think what's important to
And push
remember
it
for
later.
fiscal year '20 is that we did not build a lot of money in our budget to pay for a band, the interest money. So
Okay.
we want to make sure that we can pay the interest on this based on the current budget that we have.
This
And
budget?
This
that
budget
we've
for
already-
fiscal year '20.
Okay,
And
that's
we
where
may
my
not
timing
take,
is.
we may end up taking the money over 3 years, depending on how the work comes along. I know we did a lot of modeling over, just doing the 3 years, but we may end up in the 4th year, depending when everything finishes up and how long we carry the band for.
Okay.
It will probably be more advantageous for us to do the band for the amount of money that we need so that we can manage the interest due on that right now. And I think once we get through this first initial one, because I think we just need the startup cash to get this going. And then we can take a look at how we
Okay.
progress this fall and, come back to the board and say, do you want to go out for 2 more equal ones over the next 2 years? And we can look at those different options, because one of the things that we'll be looking at is not only working with the bond bank, but probably looking at some commercial bonds as well, working with commercial banks. It won't all come from the bond bank. We'll have to diversify a little bit, so we'll have to strategically plan that as well. So we're just in the really beginning process of that, and the most important thing was just to get something so we could get started this summer. And I can certainly report back in the summer.
Okay. And it'll all have to come to the board for authorization before it moves forward.
Okay.
So the 2 pieces of action that we need from the board tonight is, number 1, you had backup in your packet around the owner's project manager. That is the person that we hire to manage our interests throughout the project. And we're asking for your approval to get a request for proposals out as soon as possible so that we can make a recommendation to the board this summer to hire that person and get them on and moving to the next step, which would be most likely a CM, which is going to be our recommendation to you, but you did have the comparison of a general contractor versus a CM in that next step. But either one of those decisions is not impacted by the RFP for an owner's project manager. So I guess I would ask the board if you would like to do more information on the CM and the GC options, or do you want to discuss and make a motion on the OPM first?
We are going to have the owner's project manager, and that is already in the overall budget, right?
Yes.
The overall plan.
Yep.
And then either the general contractor or the construction manager. So we're going to end up having 2 folks
Correct.
there that have slightly different roles to
Yes.
keep things, okay. So I would say, go ahead.
And that was included in the bond, both these roles?
All in the
Yes.
fund.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Okay.
So I would suggest that we vote on taking action on the owner's project manager, since that's going to be, anyway, there'll be a little bit of discussion on the other one to understand the difference between the 2. So our action here is just to approve an RFP going out to hire an owner's project manager, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So with that, I would, is there any other discussion? Anybody need any other information on the owner? And they're really acting in our best interest, the owner's project manager at an overall level, right?
Right.
Okay. Any other information needed? All right, I would accept a motion to allow an RFP to go out to hire an owner's project manager for this project.
So moved.
All right, any other discussion, questions? Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next. General contractor.
So you had a
What's
document
that?
in your agenda packet that gives an overview of the roles of a general contractor and a construction manager in these, in those different categories down your left-hand side. Very clear recommendation from Dave and Cam at Truex Collins that this project fits with a construction management process versus a general contractor. And as you see, I would point out in the overview section on the CM box there that CMs are generally recommended for multi-phase owner-occupied and new or renovation projects. General contractors are for single-phase unoccupied types of projects. So there's a level of complexity to this project, and in talking with some other folks in the business, they all kind of said, yeah, this is a CM job. So you can look down, and a couple other things that I would point out in the teaming section with a GC. The drawings have to be very thorough, and they have to all be done at once. The way that we're doing this so that we can get moving next summer is there would be 2 phases of drawings. So it would be really hard to have all of that together. It would hold up construction for at least a few months if we were to try and get all of those drawings done and then go out to find a GC. But with a CM, you can phase the drawings along with the construction.
The one thing that, for the construction manager, with the guaranteed maximum price feature in there, that ends up being that they would be looking out for our best interest to keep that down, and especially under the maximum price if we go to all the incremental drawings as we go through.
Right, where you can realize savings is all of the subcontracting is done in a competitive bidding process by the CM. So that's where some savings can be realized, and the savings is passed back to the owner. Now, remember, a construction manager and the company that they're working, they have motivation, right? Mm-hmm. But they also have to stay within what's in the request for proposal, within those numbers as well. And they hold their own contingency, and we've been in touch with Visbit and Pietro Lynn, who has supported the board before. He's done a lot of these construction documents. And so you write in a lot of that around timing and penalties and all that kind of stuff into the contracts.
And so this is just the difference between the two, so we understand which one we're going to go, and then the approval or the action is to allow the RFP to go out when you're ready to.
Yes, after we would come back to you to make a recommendation, that executive committee, to the board around the owner's project manager first. Once we got that person on board, they would facilitate the CM selection process from there, which would then come back again with a recommendation from the executive committee to the board to select a construction management.
Okay. So the decision here is just the difference between the two.
Right.
We're not looking at the RFP for the CM tonight.
Well, it was in your packet, and you could approve that tonight so that we could move on that in the summer. Otherwise, we would need to pull you back in, at least a quorum, to make a decision about the CM RFP. So that's why I put both of those items in the
Okay to do them both at the same time? You guys good with that? Rather than doing it twice? Okay. All right. First one, any thoughts, difference between a general contractor and construction manager? I think the recommendation is
suitable to the information that was,
everything
just makes sense.
we know and what we've
Yeah.
got
Very
going.
straightforward.
Any
Yeah.
reason anybody would go against that? Okay. So, given that, I would accept a motion to allow the team to go forward with a construction manager RFP when ready.
So moved.
Any other thoughts, anything else? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
So the last part that doesn't require action is just a reminder that we may need a quorum of the board probably in late July to do some of this work early August. So Sandy or Krista, the new assistant, will be in touch with you all to find out some schedules so that we have some dates where, we may need to get you in at a week's notice or something to take action on some of these.
Or do it in Wells Beach? No, never mind. Just a thought, just a thought.
You're the board chair.
You're in charge.
All right, very good. So, yeah, when that does come out, I know it's, if plans aren't quite firmed up, if you can try to make the time to make the firm dates, at least something available, and then work around that, it would be greatly appreciated. We do only need a quorum, but it is always good to have everybody if we can. All right, Sean, thank you for that. All right, now, so we are at our policy 3.2, accountability of the superintendent, and our interpretation and summary. So, any comments therein? This one was relatively short, has to do with yes, thank you. Good night, guys. So the policy here is the board's only linked to the operational achievement and conduct, so that all authority and accountability of the staff, as far as the board is concerned, is considered the authority and accountability of the superintendent. So the board will never give instruction to persons who report directly or indirectly to the superintendent, not evaluate formally or informally any staff, and view successful superintendent performance as demonstrated by accomplishing board-stated ends and avoidance of prescribed means. Thoughts, comments? You guys can't be getting tired already. It's early.
Well, that one's pretty straightforward.
It is. It is. Yep, does this hit what we need it to hit?
And the policy 3.2.3 is partial compliance.
Oh, so I missed that. You know what? I completely missed that. Because I would say that is compliance.
Okay.
This was originally written, and I missed that piece when I reviewed it, was we hadn't gotten through I think the comment at that point was that the accomplishment of board's stated ends had not necessarily happened. So maybe that's not necessarily, have we accomplished the board's stated ends? Or is that always going to be partial? I guess, can you ever be there, I guess is the question.
Never be satisfied.
So given that, so just to read it again, the board will view successful superintendent performance as demonstrated by accomplishment of board stated ends and avoidance of board prescribed means. I think we can easily sit here and say that the avoidance of prescribed means has been taken care of and is in compliance. Can we sit here and say that successful superintendent performance is demonstrated by accomplishment of board stated ends?
Would some of the data be some of the newer ways that we've been trying to move towards monitoring or measuring the end statement?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Are we making progress? The way it's stated, it says accomplishment of board stated ends. Right. So if they stay together, can that ever be fully compliant?
Yes, because isn't this us reviewing the superintendent's performance.
Mhm.
As long as we're not saying like, hey, Sean, like, you know, here's this other end statement that someone else made up of.
No, I'm even looking at it a little bit different though, Alex. I understand that, but to our ends as stated, have they been accomplished?
Have all students graduated college and career ready and gone on to live.
And do we have evidence?
productive lives.
I think this policy, I'm with Alex on this one, is more about what we're judging his performance on, not whether or not like he hit the mark totally on it for
Okay,
compliance.
and is it stated well enough that way to read that?
I mean, the way I read it, it
Okay.
is, yeah.
Okay, so state again for me your comment.
It says, we will view his successful performance as demonstrated by accomplishment of the means. So it's not saying, did he accomplish these, yes or no? It says, what are we going to be judging his performance on? It's whether or not he accomplished those things and we avoided board prescribed means. We're not going to judge him based on like the car he drives or like how nice he is to us. We're judging him, we're viewing success is about whether or not he accomplished his means.
The ends, accomplish the ends,
right.
Yeah.
right?
But
And so
what
does-
Mike's saying is, do we ever accomplish the ends? Right, is that where you're headed, Mike? It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Are we?
Exactly.
Well, why would that be a
And-
basis for evaluating performance then, if it's not ever gonna happen?
But that's our judgment when we look at how he writes
Yeah.
all the ends state, you know, how he provides evidence on the ends.
Okay, I was thinking more along the lines of the data we have that we are in fact meeting the ends. Do we have the data that we can show that says that that is being done? And go ahead.
What I hear.
This is judging your.
Yeah, no, it's
your
really
piece,
interesting,
so-
right? Because what I hear you struggling a little bit is with some of the words.
Yeah.
Accomplishment,
Right.
achievement. You know, when this board has a real growth approach,
Right.
and has since I've been with you guys. So I wonder, you could. Some ways, if you wanted that to be reflected more than the concepts of achievement and accomplishment, you could look at the policy statement 3.23, or you could look at the interpretation of that. And you could talk more about progress and growth, or accomplishment of short-term metrics, or something like that, that might reflect a little more of what I think you're talking about.
That would hit more where what I'm looking at. And I guess when I looked at this thing, I'm thinking that it may be worthwhile taking 323 and breaking it into two pieces. One is the avoidance of board prescribed means. That is easy, not easy. That we know what it is, we've defined it, we get reports on it on a regular basis. The other one then could be moved to, like Sean said, showing growth in support of the ends.
Because
Year-to-year
achievement
growth.
actually kind of has that growth mindset, you know, like achievement towards, versus in the policy, the way that it's written, prior, you know, above the interpretation is accomplished, which is sort of a,
We're
Right.
there.
Right.
we're there,
Right.
Yep.
which means we can go home, right? Like we
Right.
did it.
So we won't,
It's achievement towards.
right, so I'm going to suggest that we not wordsmith this, like we've talked about any of these
Yeah.
on the spot. We'll evaluate it as it is written.
In the interpretation.
In the interpretation
Yeah.
and as
Yeah,
it
yeah.
sits, we can change the report compliance if we want to put the interpretation a little bit differently. But we may want to bring this one back and talk about the policy itself, not the,
Fair.
do we do
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
different with it?
that'd be
You wanna
great.
Do that?
Because what I love about this is it gives us more interaction with our policies. You know, it kind of gets us into the weeds of it a little bit, but then they'd be able to back out and interact with it in a way where it becomes living.
So I will adjust the interpretation to show the, I don't know, Matt, would you take a shot at just?
I mean, in some ways, your interpretation's already what Matt.
Yeah, the interpretation's
as
right
it is?
on,
Okay.
because it's about
Okay, so it's okay
achievement.
as it
Changing
says.
the interpretation of whether we should change the policy of what
Okay.
accomplishment means.
Accomplishment.
Yeah, accomplishment is the,
Do we
Is this
report compliance? on it?
So I think
The
we
way it is?
report compliance
Okay.
the way it is, but I
Alright.
think
And then bring
brings it
323
up
back.
again for the conversation
We'll
about.
bring that piece back. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think that's
So-
why I read it as
So you're going
Matt.
to take the
not
partial.
good.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll remove that when I get back this evening. And so what we'll be accepting here is, as is with reporting compliance on 323. And at some point here, we'll bring that particular subsection. You got that one? You got that one?
I got
Okay,
the
that
notes,
was-
yeah.
Okay, so I'll take care of this update. All right, so any other thoughts? Thank you for the discussion. So let's get back through these things again. So I would accept a motion to accept the policy interpretation of 3.2 accountability of the superintendent.
So moved?
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Just jumping real quick to one piece, the annual agenda next year, I've got all these in for a one-year term across. So we're gonna go through all of these since we've done them once or twice already. We're
Okay.
gonna do them all next year.
Excellent.
I've laid them out, something like the newsletter.
Thank you.
There's, I think, 12 of them and 5 of us. So
Okay.
I'm gonna solicit help to be the reviewer, the initial reviewers. I'll put it out on a Google sheet that everybody can
Perfect.
edit at the same time. First come, first serve, take 2. Take any 2. And
Okay.
I'll have to solicit somebody to take a third, 2 people to take a third one.
Okay.
And then we'll wipe that through the year, and we'll change them at the end of next year so that we all review a different policy to bring forward to the board. Do it that way. Is that fair enough? Okay. Good, so I'll get that out. I've already got it laid out. I'll just share it with everybody. Get it done.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Now, in these discussions in our recent past, we have hit a question about our interactions with the ownership. And we reported a non-compliance because we did not have in one of our policies and in the interpretation, we did not have a 3-year plan for ownership linkage. And so in our discussions after that, we said, okay, well, how do we get compliant? And everybody looked around stone-faced. So we decided to invite Val back. Val, can you join us, please? So this is our education session on what we need to consider and think about for a 3-year linkage plan and to become back compliant with one of our policy subsections that we aren't or haven't been. And so we all got material that sent out in the middle of last week. So with that, welcome back. Thank you.
Thanks. Before I start, I'd just like to say it's pretty impressive listening to the level of conversation around your policies. There's a level of sophistication that you are showing around this that is focused on policy language, reasonable interpretation or evidence that I don't see a lot of times. And I'll give you the examples I've heard earlier. When you were talking about the grievances, great question. The question becomes, do we have the evidence that we need to know that that's okay? Sean, you brought that up. Mikey asked the question. Then you get going, well, grievances can be all over the place, right? It's you get there because there's an interpretation that you're looking for an outside person, unless it's a process or procedural piece. So the conversation around that went right where it needed to go, and I'd add just one other piece, which would be, do you need to change the language in the contract, rather than, do we need to put something in, you'd ask the question, do you need to put another layer in that policy to begin to say, differentiate the level of grievances over a 5-year period? Fail to let you know that. So you can build down a little bit in the policy. And this last one about reasonable interpretation around 3.2.3, absolutely right on where you ended up. You had the reasonable interpretation, you want to look at it, I would also say you go back and you ask, what did we accept for the monitoring report in ends? And if most people are saying, are we making reasonable progress? If you're not making reasonable progress, then you're really not accomplishing what you want to do. If you are making reasonable progress, then you can label it as accomplished. But if you don't like that word, you go back and you change the policy to get the interpretation that you want. So I would tell you, as a board, you're functioning at a very, very high level in terms of your use of policy governance. So, great work. Great work.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when you say change the policy, do you mean the actual policy itself, like the word accomplishment?
Yes.
We could change that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's our.
Well, look at us having the
So-
power to do that.
Yeah, so what you should always do is once you finish, once you
Yeah,
finish,
right.
once you've finished a monitoring report, there should be a question that says, do we need to review any language in the policy and revise it?
Okay.
Because stuff changes over time. So you always have the ability to change policy at a couple of different levels. One would be, we did a monitoring report, and we just had this really great conversation about accomplished versus achieve versus whatever, and you can have that conversation. The other is, you get into the middle of something and you think, oh my goodness, we have this language, and it is really impeding our ability to do something. We need to look at our language right now. So you don't need to wait necessarily to the monitoring report, but you're always looking forward rather than looking backwards. And you do not need to wait a year if something comes up and your policy is not okay. You can say, we need to look at this and we need to revise it. Okay? And then you just go through the policy revision. So great work. What I'd like to do is, you're sort of talking about a 3-year plan. It sounds like you got a pretty good 3-year plan in front of you right now. At one level. I mean, you congratulations. You have a big, big thing in front of you. So what I'd like to do. Well, think about this. Think about what your community and what you and a whole bunch of other people just did for your kids. However, with that great gift comes some real challenges. All right? So what I would like to do is I gave you a bunch of material to read, and rather than getting into the specifics of that, what I'd like to do is go through, let's take each of the articles and what struck you about that? What questions do you have around it? And what are some of the implications that you might have, it might have for you? And we'll do each piece one at a time. And what my sense is, that I know that there's the hour that everybody, I've been teaching long enough to know when fading occurs, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. So the first thing what we're going to do then is we're going to take each of the articles, what's the new learning, what are the implications for our work as a board as we begin thinking about our 3-year plan. All right? And I'm going to do that generally. So they're generalizations you're going to make rather than, if we think about our bond, we've got to do this. I would propose that when you do your retreat, that's when you put the details around your 3 years. This is getting a conceptual framework around the 3-year plan. Right? Is there any article somebody wants to start first? There are 3 of them. There's the adding value, there's the linking with owners, and there's the futuring. Anyone come to mind first?
I would like to just touch with the board link with the owners.
Okay.
I guess.
So as you looked at that, what are the types of things that struck you as you read through that?
For me, it was the creation of the future, which also hit in the other articles,
Right.
being able, foresight and being able to do that. What I liked about this was all the different options and uses, how you would use a certain strategy for for your purpose.
Right.
The way that you want to link up with.
Yeah. So this actually gives you some tools to use
Tools, yeah.
and links those tools with a very specific need that you may have or purpose that you have. So this is really on the ground to some degree. The piece that I'd push back is you've got your ends. You've actually gone through a couple reviews of your ends. And I would offer that some of the processes that you used with the partnership and some of the processes that you used with with your review of the ends can also be done when you begin thinking about what is the work we have in front of us to link with our owners. And the reason I say that is you're going to have, I'm going to project that you're going to have some tension between budgets around building needs versus programmatic tension. Because you're going to be committed, you've got this debt service committed, and the only options you have are really around what your operating budget is. So I would offer you begin looking at some of these techniques to go out and begin talking with people, where are you, what are your values here? And re-examining ends around it, because we may become to a push-shove situation, and you want to know what the people in the community really want to value, and what are some other options you have to begin meeting those ends.
One of the hardest parts about the owner linkage is that I think in some ways we've been trying to do it on the cheap in the last 2 years. And we're really serious about going out there, because Tori and I trying to do it with, like, you know, let's meet up at, we're going to put a bunch of flyers and have people meet us at Scouts, or we're going to have these family things. It's a lot of work to do. Like, why the ends statement that I'm theorizing, because I wasn't here at that moment, is that there was grants and money that actually had a third party to really help that out.
Nailed it.
Now, we know how to do it. The hard part is actually when the rubber hits the road, when it comes to the resources available to do it. Because I think we did, you know, like we can do the theory, you know, writing it up.
Well, what we run into, and I think what the CPC also runs into, is how many different ways can we meet our community where they are and meet them?
Right.
You know, that is where I felt like the work was, and I think y'all experienced it as well, is offering different types of places and interactions, and how do we meet our community in those ways.
The other piece that I'd offer with that is I always think you have a policy that talks about board education and support. So you can look there. The other thing I think that is a tension for boards is the idea that I have to still run board meetings every month versus we're not running a board meeting. We may be meeting quarterly to do our business, but our work is going to be, this month, each board member is going to be doing these types of things. So I would be saying you're going to be getting expertise to help you design those things, but rather than believing you have to meet every month to do the work, unless you're coming here to say, we're going to design how we're doing the outreach so it doesn't sit on two people, it is the board's work when you come together. So you get through your consent agenda, you get through that stuff, and then you begin saying, where are the people in our community? What's the work we need to do with them? Who do we need to have us supported? And when are those going to happen, and we're not meeting for the next 2 months? So what you're ready to do is huge, which is the shift from running the school, which I think you're probably pretty confident is going well, to now spending most of your energy out in the community and doing it intentionally and having it replace the running of the school time. So you may be saying, we're going to have 6 meetings that will be in the community this year. It may be 3. It may be,
No, I think it's wonderful.
But it helps us change our thinking.
It's a very different approach, and most school boards have not gotten to the point that they have confidence in their monitoring system and in their policies and their work to be able to say, you know what, we don't need to meet here next month. We're going to go and we're going to do 6 meetings in the community, or 5 meetings or whatever. But it's a shift in how you begin thinking, and you may be doing that over the next 2 or 3 years. But what you need to do is get clear on what your purpose of those meetings are.
Right.
All right? And so if you go, sort of, this gets to the idea of you're now beyond sort of, you're going to say, what's the attitude of this community around the bond and where kids need to be? It'd be less the personal stuff necessarily. You may be going out and saying to people statistically, I need you to know, this is what debt service is going to look like over the fast. This is how we need to be thinking about it. What are your thoughts? So those becomes the types of work that you now shift from. And the good news is you've got experience, and what I believe, based on what I see, is you've got great comfort going out, and people know that's the role that you play. People are used to seeing you in their community, talking to them. It isn't show up at Winooski School and talk to us on the camera. You're going out to them. Most people developmentally with ownership hold big forums, and they get the same voices with the same advocacy. And getting them to shift to, how do I go figure out where people are, who we need to talk to, and how we need to talk to them, is so far down the line with them, but you have years of experience with it. Your work is, now what do we need to talk to them about? Okay?
That's what I liked about it, was the intentionality of why you go out to talk to people.
Right.
Because I've seen it so many times, good intentions, but no clarity about purpose.
Right.
You know, and it either ends up being disastrous, or it ends up just being kind of a feel-good, which can be okay if that's the purpose. But I think there's a lot of other purposes that this board could go out and engage community.
Yep. And the piece that I would offer is the 3-year plan would require a long-range goal, not a meeting-to-meeting goal. Our purpose is to do this today. Our purpose is to do this tomorrow. Our purpose is to do... No, you've got some great opportunities in front of you to be thinking about, what is it that you want at the end of 3 years with this? And what I think you've got is you've got the knowledge base and the practice to be able to say, here's what our goal is, which is going to take some work. And then what are the strategies we're going to implement over time to do that?
One thing that brings up for me is some of the conversations we're having around engaging our owners around the change in education.
Yes.
Which comes in place with the change in the building.
Right.
Right? The building was designed to support a 21st century education, conceptual thinking, right? And moving forward. So it gives us that 3-year goal of being able to do this, symbiotically, right? Like to be able to do it together.
Yeah.
Which is what we're trying to piece it together and.
It's very important for our community to understand that, as I'm learning through the diversity conversations that we're having, is that because we have a new American population that come from countries that see as schools as the authority,
Yeah.
and not understanding that proficiency-based education is bringing them involved, and they're not understanding that.
And we're still up against, even with
Even our own.
right, the old school, like it's only valid if a teacher's standing in front of you, giving it, and then testing you on it, right? And how do we change that mindset, along with the cost of the new building too?
Well, the cost is to me, the messaging, it needs to be about is an investment, but it's a value added for the whole community.
Right.
Like if I think about the intergenerational, like we cannot forget the intergenerational component of it. The folks who don't have children, not on the younger end, because sometimes they're thinking about putting their kids, but it's the ones that have stayed in the community for the long time. How do we bring them back in to say, hey, this is a community for you? And there's tons of opportunities. Like when we start getting our Jampo Joan pools, like actually having them bring in and having them do the presentations at the senior citizens or inviting at the O'Brien Center, right? But it's making them see that, right? So that the ownership, the hardest part about the ownership linkage for us is to make sure that we hit every population. And one of the added challenge that we have is that we have a population that may not necessarily vote for this stuff. But it doesn't mean that they're not owners of this school, and we need to constantly remember that. Right?
Yeah, and there was I remember in doing the ends, there was a very clear conversation about the differentiation that occurred in this community in terms of those people who had a say, through votes, and those people who did not have a say through the voting process. And that was a very big conversation, and the choice was, this was about inclusivity for the entire community. That's why I think there's a language issue with policy governance that talks about owners, that many times an organization is trying to figure out who are its owners. In schools, it's your community, and how you define that, it becomes really important work.
And I think one of the biggest things that I took out of one of these, I don't remember exactly which one it was, but the constant question of who haven't we met,
That's it.
right?
Yeah.
You can meet all the easy ones, but you got to get to the who haven't we met. Are we avoiding it? Are we just not able to get? If we're not able to get, how do we get there? If we're avoiding it, pull up your pants, hitch them up a little bit, and go do it. Right?
Yeah, and yet, it becomes really important that you go in with some courage with that, and some level of support to do that well.
Yes, if you're going to talk about proficiency-based learning, don't bring in the board to do it, bring in an expert.
But even with that, if you're going to get a very, let's say there's a group that I'm avoiding, okay? I'm going to use an example of a board I'm working with. The pre-K place is up in arms. I mean, the entire community. And so they're saying, oh my God, do we want to really get into that, and do we want to do it? The piece then becomes, if you're going to go into that really tough conversation, how do you frame that conversation in a way that you have a skill set, or there's a facilitator there, or it's convened in such a way that you can become the listener rather than the defender? That really becomes important. So who can help you convene some of the more difficult conversations that you have?
And I'm going to add that this is, we need to add why this is important for us to look at and not be afraid to talk about, or listen, not just be out there. Listen to the difficult people. Is because if we don't do it, they will get a message and a goal that will be not aligned with what we want. And they will be also, in the misalignment of their mismessaging, will prove troublesome for us in trying to convince other things. And we've seen this in our own community, because we don't reach out, but other people have found ways to reach out. They prioritize certain things that may not be our community priorities.
What other things? So there was the issue of, go pull up your pants and go find them, or there are actually tools. What other things? Alex or Matt or Martha? Anything that you're taking away from that?
For me, it's just I think we need to really be really conscientious and be realistic about the resources we're going to devote to this, and making sure that this isn't just like an exercise of strategic planning, and because the era of just putting up a flyer and people meeting you up at the coffee shop is not there.
Yeah. And if you go back, the issue that who owns the strategic plan under policy governance? Sean does.
Strategic plan, right.
What's your work? That strategic thinking. What's coming down the road that we need to be thinking about? What's the wisdom of this group? And are there other people that can help you think about that? The other piece that's really clear, in all of these articles, they talk about creating a vision for the future. And that requires a lot of time and a lot of energy. And I think there are two parts that I would talk about. One is the outreach, what's the goal of our community engagement? And I'm going to use community engagement. Okay. First, what's the goal of it? Second, how are we going to get it done? What are the tools, strategies, resources we need? And then the third part is, what are we going to do with it when we've got it? Because so many times you go out and you get this, that was a great forum. We got this. And then nothing happens with it. So part of your work becomes, what's the analysis you're going to do and decisions you're going to make based on what you got from people.
And I think that's key, because a lot of times, if you don't know where you want to be at the end when you start, you end
Yep.
up floundering and not getting to an end point. And I think
Well-
it's better to start with the end, where do I want to be when I'm done?
Yep.
And how do we get there? And that's, rather than just putting a community dinner together.
Yep.
And then figuring out what to say.
And it may not be that you know, I think there's a difference in knowing where you'll be if you're talking about a destination versus, do I know what I want, why I'm doing this? So the example could be, I could go out and engage the community in a vision that I have. And I can judge the work that I did. Is the community supporting the vision that I have? We made it. Or is the purpose for the board to get the wisdom of the community to find out what vision it should set? And that's done with two parts. Where's our community? And the other piece is, what do we know that the community doesn't know that we need to get them information around, which you talked about. We've got an entirely different way of looking at education. So if we go out and we ask the community, they're going to say 18 years, graduation requirements, the teacher knows. So before you go out and do that visioning work, part of it may be an educational component. Because I can pretty much guarantee, unless you have people who have been really disenfranchised by the educational system, and even then they're going to say, going to college is the most important thing, and this is how you get into college. And it's a very different view. And so part of what your work may need to be, and I think it dovetails very nicely with what is going to be happening as you begin developing, what are the schematics for this? What's the program design? You're building a building based on some assumptions and values. Do you want to get in front of those, and how do you communicate those to the community, and how do you get that information back? So your role becomes really, you may have the purpose at the end is to have a building and a community that are in alignment around the purpose of education and vision of education. Some looks on people's faces, which means,
Somewhere in there you mentioned too about, you can't meet all 7,000 owners, but you can see a selective sample, a representative sample. And we have the series called Focus on Learning, where we bring in different groups, and we focused on, populations here in Winooski. And to their credit, both Mike and Alex, every single time, ask the question, like, how can we connect to you? Like, what's the best forum to connect to you? Like, how can we do that? So we've done some of this work. It's just kind of, I think, sitting in our notes somewhere. And so we should go back and do a little theme analysis and find all those times where people said, you should connect to us here.
Yep.
And then bring these conversations to those
yeah,
forums.
I think it also requires, Matt, when you look at your work plan, how much are you going to devote to really doing board work around community engagement, and how much work are you going to do around sort of the nuts and bolts of what we normally do? And if there's a real intent, I would say you want to do 50% of your work around that type of, let's go back and find out how we connect. Let's figure out what our purpose is. Who can we bring to the table to help us think how we do this, and then build that out into a plan. And the way I'd think about it is, you'd have your 3-year destination to some degree, what your purpose is, and then sort of benchmarks along the way, and then figure out what's the time that we need to do that, and what's the resource we need to do that. And I would offer, you've done all the groundwork that is going to allow you to say, we can spend 50% of our time out with the community.
It's a long way from where we were in it.
I can remember sitting right there when you started.
So, just a couple of procedural checks before I get too far off. We've got an annual agenda. We've got things that seem to keep us busy when we do get here once a month. Do you put those, I'd like to think so anyway, right? We have been. I know we can turn outward and into the community. What do we do with the work that's left behind?
And what, can you give me an example of what work you would think would be left behind?
That's what I was thinking before I even asked the question. And one of the things that comes up is the acceptance of the policy interpretations for Sean. And, being in consent, as long as we see them and agree with them.
Yep. So
not a problem after we've seen them.
So you've gone through them all once, Sean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is, so you can develop a monitoring system, because I heard something happened here, which is, okay, we got 12 policies, each needs to sign up for something. I don't know what that was, but is that for the board governance monitoring?
Just to be able to look at the board governance, yeah.
You can have one person look at it and say, meets the need over the next 2 years. Or it doesn't. I recommend we accept it. It goes on the consent agenda. Everybody has it, but one person takes responsibility for reading that ahead of time and saying, yes, yes, yes.
If you do that, how do you avoid the rubber stamp that you now have missed something in the need to adjust a policy, or the interpretation should or could be better or needs to be better, but we're just going to how do you get away from it being just a rubber stamp?
I think
that's what I fear the most.
I think the piece that you can do is you're always going to run a worry of losing something if you're not inspecting it all the time. So there are ways you can go, which would be, if in fact whoever's looking at it says, this seems okay, you'd have two people look at it, which gives you a backup. They look at it outside of the meetings, and one of the questions is, does this policy need to be revised? Is the interpretation reasonable? The question I would have is there enough confidence as you, as individual board members, for you to look at that and say, I've got pretty good confidence reading through those and knowing what's supposed to be in there?
For the next year, yes. And then I worry about, and I say that only because 2 board members will be reelected, and as long as we have the continuity of the board, I feel confident in doing it, and I think that's part of the plan, right?
Continuity or the initial education that brings people up to speed properly.
Right, to make sure that, and that's something that you have to think about before you go into the rubber stamping, but like in the next year, I have full confidence that.
So over the next year, I would figure out a methodology that takes no time in board meetings, unless there is a question that is arisen from the review. Because you do have to move stuff off.
Yeah. And I guess that's where I was going. Where does that stuff go?
Goes on to a consent agenda.
Part of it says it could go on to a consent agenda.
Yeah. I remember at some conference that we met, your comment to me was, oh my God, we've gotten so good, we could meet quarterly. We're having trouble finding work. If you can remember what happened.
We had to be here till midnight. and I knew that wasn't an option.
No, but I think the piece is you begin moving stuff that you have by tradition put on your agendas, and the board has become actively involved with them, versus just moving to consent agenda and say, this is really the work. Or you could look at, this month we're doing this amount of work, and this month we're really only focusing on a quick consent agenda, and all of our work is going to be on community engagement and that type of thing.
And so to do that would be to develop a methodology that we're all comfortable with, that is the checks and balances of our policies, that includes using the progress monitoring, that we're backing up how we're doing with the policies, and that we're clear, so that when something comes up, we create a methodology that it becomes a tradition of how we're doing it. And then we can educate along the way, so that we're passing that methodology along to make sure there are checks and balances on how we're doing in our policies.
And Sean has a responsibility to come and say, oh, wait a minute here.
Yeah.
We got a problem. So there should be a system that says, unless Sean is coming forward and telling you there's a problem, this is pretty straightforward. And you may not have what I would call continuous growth and depth on the monitoring policies, But you may say, these are sufficient right now because we've got other important work that we need to do.
things are more important.
Are more important, and that just becomes a value that you're making.
Yeah. So would it behoove us to be able to move that work so that we can get to something? I feel like we're all, possibly we feel like spending 50% of the time of board work engaging in our community is a relevant, important piece. Creating a methodology to make sure we're feeling comfortable shifting.
Yeah.
And then finding support to do that, you know, to make sure that we get a methodology in line that feels good, feels thorough, so that we can start shifting.
That could be part of our board retreat, right?
Yes.
Just like that's the first item, is to figure out how are we
do we
going to
make
be
that
all
shift?
right with this consent and moving it?
Yeah.
Boom, because we are going to dedicate community outreach in the next year.
And we've got to agree that that is the more important piece.
That's the value.
I think.
We have to agree that that's the value.
As we do that, then the other
Right.
things we can
Yeah, I think
prioritize.
the other piece is, I threw out 50% just to,
Yeah.
just.
Sure, right.
I have no wedding to that. I think the piece is, what I would offer is more important. Why do you need to engage the community? What's the purpose? And then say, given that purpose over the next 3 years, how do we need to really play that out over a 3-year period? We may not be ready to go out into the community to do this work. We may need to bring somebody in to help train us on how we collect data, how we do that, how we process it. So we'd be sitting here in a board meeting doing that. The other piece is boards sometimes can even take a little bit more of a backseat and allow the superintendent to really manage. So I'd give the example tonight, I think, Sean, your piece on, okay, I've given you that information, here's the action I need you to do. There's no discussion about it. If you've got a question, great, but here's the recommendation, bang. So you don't, what ends up happening, 10 or 15 minutes here and there builds up to a lot of stuff. So the other way to do it is just say, Sean, you're going to run this place because we've delegated that to you. We need you to give that background information and do this. So I think those are the types of places where you gather and gain some time. And if you're not comfortable, that's okay too, because what you're saying is we're not compliant in going out in the community. So any steps you're going to take are going to move you more towards compliance. And my guess is the issue of what I heard, the issue of non-compliance was we don't have a 3-year plan. Not that you weren't engaging the community. Is that fair to say?
We were attempting to engage the community and understand, I mean, it's been a thought all along. We don't have a 3-year plan. We don't have something that says.
It's also, there's evidence of us, it shows up when we do our budget meetings and there's only one other person that comes in.
Yes.
Right?
For all the different meetings that were set up for the CPC, you know, like the capital project committee, and how many of our community members.
Or the fun of the, all of our school tours.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, the best community engagement is basically us really sitting outside every bond vote and engaging with the people that came out, and that got us a group of people that we never saw, right? The no voters.
Yeah, and I think the piece is you're really beginning to say, what do we need to talk about, which is the first thing you have to do. Then given that, what do we need to know to be able to do that? And then given that, what are our strategies to do that, and bring it back for us to discuss and have it have an impact, not just go through the motions.
Right.
But, I mean, may I be more basic than that? Like, do we all know why we need to talk about it?
That's where you start.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think.
Do we know why we?
Why do we need to engage?
I feel that with the turnout we had in May, yes, we had a positive vote, but I think we would have had, I think we needed to have more people with more knowledge about what it is we're doing and why, or why we're doing what we're doing. And then you get more involvement I think if we'd have started this discussion 4 or 5 years ago and had this in mind, we'd have had a lot more input along the way. Not that we didn't get all the input we needed,
So
but we get the community understanding and involvement.
maybe this is all new person question, right? Because all of this concept is new to me about once the bond is passed, something is going to happen, right? Something. We're moving. The bond is passed. We know what we want to do. At what point can owners change a trajectory? Can they? What can owners? I'm not clear. I understand. I mean, on the one hand, sort of intellectually, I understand the community engagement. I don't understand what it means and what it can do in terms of the progress of the project.
Yep.
Moving it forward or back or sideways or, yeah.
To me, it will come down to the following year budget votes. It's the day-to-day budget, yearly budget votes that we have to do.
Yeah.
And they can kind of start saying no to our budget.
They're gonna have the
plan.
money in the next votes over the
Okay.
next 3 or 4 years, depending on how many bonds we take out. We're gonna pass all of them to move
Right.
through this.
So that's that's a correlation, bond vote, budget, bond vote, budget. If you really want to talk about what you're trying to do as a board member, is help the community see what the organization could be in the future and how
Yeah.
you get that.
That makes sense.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's really what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And what one of the actions was, we need to get a bond passed here. But that's really not the overarching purpose. And so if you thought about that being the overarching purpose, and do we know about our community to help them see that, to help them form that, and then be able to do, I mean, I was working with one board who had 4 kids coming into kindergarten. 4 kids. And they said, well, what do we do? And I said, probably you need to be talking with the planning commission. You need to be talking with people about what do they see as what is in the future here, because if you're looking at today and only planning for today as a board, you're failing your kids. Because you need to be thinking, if I've only got 4 kids coming in, what do we need to be thinking about as a board 4 years down the path? Those are the types of things that the board needs to be engaged in, and 9 times out of 10, you need to have conversations with the community to help set that direction, but also get their feedback. The articles that I gave to you pretty much overlap a lot in terms of futuring and some of the work that you can do. You can use that as a resource. There's a great way to look at 3-year planning and building that. I'm not stuck on anybody's methodology. You can get a pretty good plan, but what becomes important is what's the purpose of what you're trying to do? And I would do it as altruistically as you can with some real issues underneath that. If that's really crystal clear, I guess, huh?
No, but that's what it has to be.
Yeah.
By definition.
Yeah, so I'm worried about the budget passing, but if I'm only going to go out and talk about the finances,
No,
it's
that's-
not
yeah,
going to do
that's
it.
not
I've
good.
got to talk about what we're trying to create here.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that you hit that, I mean,
Yeah.
hard when we did the
Yeah.
presentations. That was kind of your view, this is what we're doing here, and I ended up talking at the tail end of it, which was the result.
I
is
think
the-
we have, like I
these-
said, I think we have all the resources, it's just getting that message out greater, out there, to see what the potential, what the school can be, not just for the parents with their kids here, but the potential for the people who don't have kids. I mean,
Home values.
Home values,
Yeah.
I mean, but it's even like,
Right.
you think about the health and development of like people who are, in growing ages, the loneliness that we have. And here's a school that we can connect potentially through presentations to the other owners so that they can see the value of why, what it means to have an educated populace, a democracy, all those good things that we talk about, but we have to make the connections for our people. And I don't think it's always there for us.
Yeah, and for you to do that requires time, thought, and the focus. If you believe it's going to happen without that work plan, it's going to get off the track. I think the other thing that I'd offer as a bias from my perspective, that education is not going to just be within the walls of the school anymore. And so how do you help the community see what role they can begin playing and what's the benefit for them with that? So, any other questions that came up for any of the readings that you had, or?
Appreciate you coming. It brings the focus for us to really, as a group now, and understand. I also wanted to say too that if you want to use any of these video clips as your case studies as you train other boards for what, please, I mean, if the rest of the board does not mind, please feel free. And if you ever want to send a little donation back to us,
I was wondering if he was going to get to that part.
Gotta connect it all, Mike.
Let's see, is this the fundraising?
There's a line item.
Because it was a very rewarding when you actually said, here's what, as a policy board, and you're having the perspective how far we've been, how far we've come, and being able to tell that, you know, and then I'm sure you could just play and stop, like, see, this is what they did.
Yeah, I would need to go back and get the archives.
Right, but you have the video here to say, like, this is what the end goal of a policy base, and see how
absolutely.
And
yet, the piece that's really interesting, Alex, is some people struggle with that concept.
I know.
Wow.
I had one other thing that if you can comment on, and that was in one of them, I don't remember which article it was, but it mentioned having a pretty detailed plan for year one and a little lesser of 2, but still guidance, and then 3 is out there, and then when 2 becomes 1, you detail it out deeper. Year 2 goes a little deeper. I mean, is it by necessity leaving it a little soft on the end, or?
I think that the softness is the strategies you use, not the purpose. The purpose is firm, that this is what we're working on. Although, given some of your feedback, you may say, we need to tweak that. In my experience, planning never goes the way that one anticipates it, because there are great gifts that come in it, and there are some left turns that come in it. So I think what they're saying with the 3-year plan is you really plan, because you're doing an annual work plan, you have some very specific work that you're going to do there, and then you have your best guess of what the work will look like in that 2nd year, and your best guess of what the work would look like in the 3rd year. But given where you got, in some areas, you may be 2 years, we're at year 3 on this. In others, you may be back, you didn't get where you needed to go. So really, the annual work plan you did, if you're going to do a 3-year plan, I'd have it be pretty specific the 1st year, because you're going to build that into your work plan. And the 2nd, you're really just going to put some targets out. If we move this way, this is the target we're going to work for the 2nd year. And then build the specifics around that.
But keeping the crystal clarity of
I think
what you're
you
looking
will spin your wheels and waste a lot of energy building a 3-year plan.
Okay. I guess that's what I was after, how detailed.
If you're going to do a 3-year plan, you're going to say, this is where we want to be in the 3rd year. Here are the benchmarks we have. We know how to, we can get in contact with any group of people we want. Here are the types of things. Here's the goal that we have. And 1st year, this is where we're going to start with it. And then, given that, 2nd year, this is what we're going to do with our annual work plan. And you keep building it out, but you keep setting that mark.
So how is the information, I'm just fascinated by the information gathering and determination of, I think Alex said this ownership, and I need to really keep defining it with this community in mind, right? And how, how do we avoid our own hierarchies as we think about stakeholders and owners, right? And it seems to me that that figuring out the how we do this should take a considerable amount of time, right? Particularly given the various populations here, that it has to be a structured, sort of organized way of engaging the community that we take on responsibly. But rather than, okay, I'm going to do this one, I'm going to do that one. But we have to be very thoughtful about our approach to the various communities in this community.
And how it fits.
How we, and it seems hard, it seems difficult as I'm even sort of thinking about the questions and reading through the questions and how people imagine themselves, right, in their own ownership, and how culture can make the explanation of the why of this a tremendous, that in and of itself, you're the teacher, you're the board, you're the school, this is the way it happens. I said, and in this population, my suspicion is that the non-voting, I won't say owners, probably has the substantial number of children in the school as opposed to those who do. I don't know what we do with that, right? I don't know how we weight that, if we do.
Yeah. But those are great questions. And I think the piece that I usually say to people in schools, owner is a policy governance term that's just used.
Okay.
I always talk about how do we connect with the members of our community.
Okay. Yeah.
And the piece that I think is important is to distinguish between who's the community that we're serving, which is the broad community, and who's getting benefit from it.
Okay.
The beneficiaries, who are the parents, the students, the teachers, the staff, who have a very different view and are usually the people that show up, whereas everybody else doesn't. So rather than use the language here, which I think when you go out into the community and say, we're doing an owner linkage, they're going to look at you, owner of what? What owner? But if you say, we want to talk to you because you're a member of this community and we serve this community as board members around the issue of education, we want your thoughts. Or we want to talk with you about what we think's coming down the road for how kids are going to learn.
Well, and I think that's important because, there's too much us versus them. And it's not just the culture, right? It's landowners versus renters. I've heard that language a lot here. And it's like, no, we're all members of Winooski. We need it all. And I think in some ways this exercise can help even some of the city relationships with the community members by broadening it and helping out. Remember, we've been seeing an interesting time here, right? Like the city went away, right, to say like we need to get the non-voters to vote without actually reaching out to the community members, right? It became a voting issue, right? I think we can help set that bar and work with the city, and I encourage us to work with the city in thinking about this. Is really, once again, it goes back to me always saying, how do we define a Winooskiite? Winooskiite is everything. Is basically to me is a person that's living in this 1.4 square miles, and some of these staff members and faculty who are part of our community, the business owners who are also part of our community.
Right. And now those are the types of things that you just begin and put it in language that people can understand. Anything else?
I hope you feel excited. It's a lot of work, but you talk about having something meaningful to do for the next 3 years.
Well, I think when you get to that, and I start thinking back of coming in here to accept a policy that I mean, we've got the faith and the trust, and we have no reason to believe that many of Sean's executive limitations have been any issues. Yet we come in here, we run through them, we read through them. We would be better served out doing the outreach.
Our community would be better
Our,
served.
yes, our school and the
Yep.
community would be better.
And those are the decisions you've got to make. And if you've got systems in place that make you feel confident that you're doing the due diligence because you've delegated through policy the running of the organization to Sean. Now you're willing to say, am I going to take the training wheels off and really let that happen? Because we've got important work to do that no one else can do.
And I like the comments about having that visibility, the dancers can't see the pattern, but when you're sitting in the balcony,
Yeah.
you have that ability. So that analogy was, but.
Well,
you
you've
know,
worked very
It's
hard.
got a different viewpoint.
Yeah.
You've worked as a board really hard the past 6 years to develop a system that has created potential capacity to do the more important work.
Right.
You know, when you think about if you were to analyze your agendas or your annual agenda, you could do board monitoring, superintendent monitoring, and policy review. That's a big chunk of what you do in your meetings. That could all be, a methodology could be
Right.
developed to do that much quicker, to give you the time and capacity to do the work that you're talking about.
There actually, if you've got the toolkit, there are different ways that you can go online. I've got some different ways of doing monitoring that you could look at.
And so when we get to, I just want to continue the work that we do, our mandatory, mandatory policies, usually the first thing I do is I say, all right, how does this work for you? Right? Because if the policy isn't working and it's a state mandated policy, and it's essentially, we've taken this School Board Association template that kind of drives, and it's not having an adverse impact on
Yeah,
the district, then, you know, is that consentable?
And absolutely. And in fact, what I would say is the expectation of the board is, Sean, you take care of it. And if there's an issue, you need to come and tell us that you've changed the policy from the way the VSBA has put it out. That it really sits with him to notify you. You don't have to control that back.
Because I just go back to the 3-ring binder I got when I started. It
Oh
was
my God.
3.5 inches thick.
Oh, I know.
And all it had was policies I didn't want to read.
And procedures.
And procedures, well,
Yeah.
most of it was procedures.
Yeah.
But
you're grounded now in the
that's-
policies you need to be grounded in.
Right.
Yet generally speaking, the state and federally mandated are operational. They are not governance. And if they are governance, then it's Sean's job to come, and you as the board chair would get notification, here's a VSBA role around governance that you need to pay attention to. So, part of it.
starts clearing
Yep.
to take care of some of the other things that.
The thing that would be interesting is I don't know whether you have it, but take a board agenda or a board work plan from 6 years ago and say, how did that?
No, I shook and sweat through that. I did that once. I'm not going back.
But I think the piece,
Yes,
is
well-
rather than have it create post-traumatic stress, but to say, here's where we were, and because of our systems, we were doing this. Here's where we are now, and because of our systems, we're doing this. What are the systems we need to take the next step?
Yeah, that would. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
I think.
Board video
I
and board policy.
think we have at least a path.
Yep.
To move.
A new direction.
We need to
Yeah,
have
it's
some
great.
discussion. I'm going to suggest that, what have we put on a board retreat so far? Have we said anything really deep in that? I mean, have we really locked anything into that yet? Nothing locked yet, right?
No.
Isn't enough time for you all to
No, I
change?
mean, we do the ends report.
Yep, but it's the end report, it's the readout on what went good last year, what things you guys need for this year, and then.
Right.
Okay.
I have a
mean,
question.
I think the city council and the school board, joint stuff that we discussed the other night, that's another item that would be important.
For a board report or retreat, we usually have the administrators there, but if we're kind of redefining and reshifting our work, would that need to involve them? So that we have a retreat where we're actually trying, maybe we do it at a board meeting of each of us taking some way to bring the information we need to start making decisions around methodology and how we're going to start making that shift. But I just don't know if those board retreats that we do, which involves administration, which is awesome because it does give us information about our ends, and if it's a different,
That's
it
where
needs
I
to be a
was, that's
different
where I was
place.
going.
I can make the suggestion is that we do the board retreat here, and maybe our first public outreach is with the administrators, so that they listen to hear our plan and see our values, and then if they have feedback, and we're listening to them.
But we've got to get to that place.
No, I'm saying that our first, we don't have them at our board retreat, but our first, like, kind of outreach publicly meeting is with the administrators as a test case to see how we're comfortable with it.
Well, or you could go and say, what are the trends? What do you view 5 years from now? What are you seeing?
Yeah.
So you're getting some of that information.
Right.
Yes.
Right? And it's a different approach.
There's nothing
I'm
that says you
thinking
can't
where
go
the
to
starting
stakeholders.
place is.
Yeah.
How do we
Yeah.
get to ourselves where we're starting to craft this new shift?
Well, one of the things I agree that I think the board retreat would be the best place to do that. We may even want to have help with coordinating that discussion so that we have somebody from the
we're going to need
outside and we don't
guidance,
have
something
to
outside
think.
of, yeah.
But I also know that if I'm going to write something, if there's already something written, it's a whole lot easier to get to an endpoint or at least get formally. So maybe what we could do is get some start this summer on laying an outline together, and then we can get the board retreat started on the run rather than from scratch. Right.
What do you
So
mean
we
with
can talk-
outline started?
Just some kind of, based on what we've talked about here,
Right.
is just some framework about what we would want for an agenda at the retreat. Have a guided discussion, have somebody come in to help us, maybe Susan.
To begin to make the shift that you've all been
To
talking about.
begin to, how do we get that, because I'm envisioning next year having at least 3 meetings out in the community somewhere rather than in here. I mean, we got budgets up front, but, some of those we've got to do that, but.
It reminds me of the January Saturday morning we spent with you getting started on policy governance. Of being led through like getting started, and being led through the process of making now this next shift. And it was a cold January morning that we were all there for coffee. You were here guiding us. But that type of work for me, to be invested in it, to sort of, because this is it is a big shift.
Okay.
I think it would require that type of facilitation and education.
Yep.
to
So
get started.
Sean and I can talk as we go over here. But I think just having some kind of a starting point when we get there. We got it right here. It's just a matter of
Yeah.
formatting it, right?
Yeah,
All right.
turning it into a system.
Anything else for Val? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It was very exciting.
Thanks, Val.
Yay, thank you.
Good
I look
guidance.
forward to seeing the results.
You too.
Never be final results, it'll all be interim.
Achievement.
All progress.
All progress.
Achievement or accomplishment. All right, reasonable progress. So, next here we have,
Community engagement.
yeah, I mean, anything anybody wants to spell out for our community engagement activities?
Margaret and I have been really engaged in the diversity community talks with the
Thank
city.
you, both of you.
And
How's that going?
it's exhausting and
Is it
and
purposeful
being-
exhaustion?
what?
Purposeful exhaustion?
It's a lot of educating, I think, or us educating
Right.
the other city
No, I mean,
folks.
I can see where that's required. How long you have to do it.
I mean, the hard part is just seeing how well they're going to be able to sustain this. I mean, really, they gave out, we're talking about $5,000. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
You know, but, you know, the worthwhile thing is I'm glad that they got the students. The schools are well represented, but being the role model for the students, and it's just constantly teaching them that they have a voice and being there. But, you know, I think they're still stuck in some ways with the traditional, like, structures where we're trying to rethink about how do we do the outreach, how do we hear the voice on that. So, but is there anything, Margaret, you probably have a different
The
opinion.
positive is that I think with the mapping, we know we have spaces and places where people meet, right? That for me, given this conversation, is the most beneficial aspect, that we literally have various, you know, what are the community events and celebrations, right? Where do they happen? Where does this community have its celebration? So I think that was useful in sort of thinking about how we get out and about into the where people are. Yeah.
And I gotta admit, like when we talked about the events and the assets, there was a large list that is generated from the school.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And that's why when
Large.
you know, there is truth to say that we're the heart of the community.
Yes. That's good. And maybe we need that evidence too, to remind ourselves and see where we're building from, like what are we doing well and where.
You will be happy to know that your name was on the list of people to know in Winooski. You and Sherman.
Okay.
That's a
And
good
Tori's
thing.
name was up there too.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, but it's a really good thing to know that the school board has that kind of visibility, right?
Yep.
I thought that was pretty cool.
So speaking
Well,
of
thank
the
you for doing that work.
visibility, yeah, thank you very much. So speaking of the visibility, the newsletters, Matt, you got this June one?
I never saw the last
Okay.
one.
And,
Did you get the last
Ann's
newsletter?
been sending out her
I did get her email.
pokings and proddings.
Yeah.
Mine didn't come.
Tori, you have the due mid-July newsletter for August. And then
Great.
Alex, you got the
Mid-July.
mid-August for the September newsletter. This discussion of, you know, the outreach may be a good piece of it. We got to keep a focus in there, I think, on the, somehow on the capital project and where we are with it, to keep that in the light, I think. We got to keep that visible.
Will we have the board retreat then before the mid-August meeting, so I can start talking about our outreach and communication? Or
Yeah,
ours is
September.
Okay, so that should be the September letter is our
For
new
October,
outreach.
yeah.
Right, I'll think, we'll talk about the capital.
I
Or
can find
even-
the pump though too, if you want me just to mention it.
I was going to say, there's nothing wrong with mentioning this discussion now, that we're looking to get out and do that outreach, and the forms it takes, you know, will be dependent on what we've got, and,
Well, you know, I'll write my favorite part about what's on the whiskey and then leave it in.
yeah, that's
And that'll
fine.
be the start of that conversation.
Okay, and Tori, you're good with something, anyway?
I'm always good with something.
That's why I ask them open-ended questions. Don't want to offer up anything too much. So then, graduation Saturday at 1. Last student day next Wednesday. Alex, thank you very much for covering the thank you for both Sean and I. That is greatly appreciated. Sean and I are tied up. We usually give some words on the way out at the end, and so Alex is going to do that if somebody wants to join him. Wednesday, the 19th at 11. I'm sure.
11:30 it starts.
11:30. Yep.
Yeah, in the cafeteria.
So it's 11 here, but it's
Students
the
get out at
dismissal
11 and then lunch and.
Get organized and
Moving up day.
The
with
moving up
kitty
day.
Winnies. When is that? Is that the 8th? Is it the 18th?
There's, the 17th, I think, is the 8th grade moving up day.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
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 Moving
And then
up day.
the June pose happening today, tomorrow,
Tuesday.
Friday,
Yeah.
and Monday. and Monday too.
I mean, I know Sophia won't want us to publicize, but she's doing it on Friday if y'all want to. We want to show her support, you know.
Yeah.
All right.
One thing
Good.
I'm wondering is, are we going to have a way to thank Sandy Mativier for her work? Is there something that's
well-
going on for us to join in, or?
The luncheon would be a way, if you wanted to. And Alex is going to, we don't typically do like a big individual testimonial at that event, but she'll be recognized. And then there's a gift that comes from the board.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
excellent. So that's a long,
Yeah. But
Service.
if you're around, she would love to see you. If you're around
Yeah.
and come into the office and just visit with her, she would love that.
right, when's her last day?
The 20th,
Of June?
yes.
Okay.
She will be back in also. We have some consulting days for her through the end of December
Okay,
to support the new
okay.
person,
Sweet.
Krista. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, anything else before we close up shop? I would accept a motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Warrants, please don't forget. We have warrants.